What's up, everybody? Marvel the Cross 316 back with another comic book flashback. And today, folks, we are looking at Ultimate Spider-Man issue number 74, and we're looking at the third part of this Hobgoblin storyline. And I'll go ahead and tell y'all we're not seeing Hobgoblin yet in this series, but we have more things going on, more things developing as the issues continue to unravel here. I mean, just this is a really good storyline, I have to say. There's a lot of suspense. You don't know if Harry Osborne is on the side of Peter Parker or if he's a friend. Is he an ally or is he a foe? That's the big question. So now we're picking up from what we left off from issue number 72. Last issue is more of an origin story about what's been going on in Harry's life, but now we're picking up from what transpired in issue number 72. And so we see that Harry was in Peter Parker's basement. The Parkers had just moved into their new house. They got to start unpacking. But Harry is looking at Peter's mask, and he told Peter at the very end of issue number 72 that him and Mary Jane used to date. And this is big news to Peter because Peter didn't know any of this, and Mary Jane didn't tell him. And so Peter's like, "What did you just say? Did you just say you dated MJ before I did? What?" And we see Harry says, "Thing is, Peter, no one understands all the crap we've been through. Even if we told them all the crap, even if we could tell them, no one could understand. How could they?" So he's talking about both him and Peter. Like, they've gone through a bunch of crap with Harry and his dad becoming the Green Goblin and the death of his mother, and Peter becoming Spider-Man, the death of his Uncle Ben and the death of Gwen Stacy. There's a lot between these two, and we see Harry gives Peter a hug, and he says something very suspicious here. It's very ominous. He says, "I'm going to help you, and you're going to help me." We don't exactly know exactly what that's a reference to, but we'll soon find out. I think we'll find out next issue exactly what he means. So the next day at school, everybody is in class, and it looks like the teacher says that they need to start studying because tomorrow's test is tomorrow or whatever. So they start studying. Meanwhile, Mary Jane knows that something's up with Peter. She writes him a note, passes it, and Peter won't look. So she's like, "Ahem." And then he looks. She wrote, "Want to make out during lunch?" And Peter looks back down. Mary Jane's like, "What is up with him?" So she kicks him, and she's like, "What's wrong?" And then the teacher says, "Miss Watson, please don't drag Mr. Parker's grade down to your level." So after class, she finds Peter's in his Spider-Man costume. She crawls out to him, and she says, "Peter, what are you doing? Why are you mad at me?" And then here's when Spider-Man comes down and he says, "So when are we going to tell me that you and Harry dated?" And she's like, "I thought it wasn't a big deal." He said, "It wasn't? The fact that all this time you never mention it makes it a big deal." And she said, "Did Harry tell you?" And he said, "Yeah, and when were you going to tell me?" He said, "What's the big deal?" And he said, "Because you're going to die." And you're like, "What?" And Spider-Man says, You're this stupid that you would lie to me about Osborne, about a guy like this." Mary Jane says, "I didn't lie." And then Spider-Man says, "Remember that day you almost died? When Harry's dad grabbed you and threw you off the bridge, remember? I asked you then, what were you doing at Harry's in the first place?" He said, "Even after Harry's dad almost kills you, all of that, Harry comes back and you run right to him." So Peter's all confused right here. He is all confused. Harry didn't even tell him exactly when him and Mary Jane dated, because we know that they dated right after he became, like, got bit by that spider. That's even before their relationship. So there's a lot of confusion with Peter Parker. He doesn't know this. Mary Jane can't tell him anything because Spider-Man is furious. He takes off his mask, and He's basically going to say, listen very carefully. The Osborns are nuts. You hear what I'm saying? Stay away from them. Harry is dangerous. And then she says, how is he dangerous? And he says, because I should never have told you who I was. He puts on his mask and swings off. So after school, Spider-Man is nowhere to be seen. Mary Jane's walking alone. Here comes Harry Osborne. And he said, hey, where's Peter? And she's like, oh, he's not here. He said, you guys okay? And Mary Jane's like, I don't know. I think he may have broke up with me. He said, what? He said, he didn't exactly say the words, but he's mad at me. He said, did you tell him? I said, well, I did, yeah, but I thought it was like 1,000,000,000 years ago. I was just goofing around. It was a joke. She said, was it a joke? I'd like to hear this joke. And Harry's like, I don't remember. I thought it was old news. I thought you had told him. And he's like, yeah, I should have. I should have told him. And he said, he's not the same guy you think he is. So here we go. We have Harry Osborne trying to persuade Mary Jane into thinking that Peter's not the same guy that she thinks he is. And that when Peter puts on the Spider-Man costume, he is a different person. And then we see that Harry's going to reveal to Mary Jane that Spider-Man is responsible for the death of his father. And so that is definitely not true because Norman Osborn isn't dead. And so we're going to switch scenes now, and we see that Spider-Man is going to break up this guy. He's sticking this guy up, holding him hostage with his gun, and he's going to, absolutely beat the crap out of this one guy and throws him into this car. Spider-Man's like, oh crap, did I go too far? And so he's going to take the limp body of this one guy into the hospital, and he tells them, he says, and tell the police I'll be waiting for them outside. So the police arrive on the scene, and he's going to have a conversation with Jean DeWolf, and he says he's going to give himself up to the police, that he's a murderer. But what we're going to find out is Captain Jean DeWolf is not going to press any charges or are going to arrest Spider-Man for what he did because the guy is conscious. He's alive. He just was knocked unconscious by Spider-Man. And so he's under arrest, the guy that was doing the stick-up. And so what we see here is Spider-Man's like, but I'm a murderer. I'm a thief. Just turn me in already. But she's like, kid, I'm not arresting you. If anything, I'd like to write up a commendation for you. Yeah, I've only been a cop 11 years, so I can't relate at all. She replies sarcastically, hey, I don't know why you put on a costume. I have no idea how it is you do what you do. But from one law enforcer to another, take it from me. You gotta relax. He said, here's my card. You ever need anything that doesn't involve this little teenage nervous breakdown you're having? You ever need any real help with any of this? You call me. And wash your costume. You smell like hot dogs. Girls don't like that. So we see Peter's going to return back to his new house. Things have still not been put up yet. And Aunt May's noticing that Peter is in a bad mood. She said that Mary Jane came by to help unpack a little bit. And she told Aunt May that they had been in a fight. And she said that she's responsible for what's happened. And she said, oh, really? He said, is it? He said, I don't know. Aunt May says, I got her to help me unpack. I feel bad. I took advantage of her guilt. Peter says, good. He said, come here. He said, no. He said, oh, come here. And he gives him a hug. She says, you're a special boy. He said, I'm not. All of a sudden, we see that get a phone call, and it just so happens to be Harry on the phone. Aunt May does not like any of the Osborns at this point. She doesn't trust them. But Peter takes the phone from Aunt May and he says, what do you want from me, Harry? What? And on the other end of the line, we see Harry is smirking and he says, it's time. Peter says, for what? And Harry Osborne says, "You help me, I help you. Bring the costume." And then he hangs up. And he tells Aunt May at the very end of this issue, "Aunt May, I have to go back out." So that's how we conclude this issue, but we have more to look forward to next issue in issue number 75. But before we look at issue number 75, do me a favor and drop a like on this video. Comment down below what you liked about this issue. Subscribe if you have not, and I will see y'all in the next one.